George, and as mentioned, I'm an assistant professor at Villanova University, an assistant professor of political science. My areas of expertise are political psychology and racial and ethnic politics. I'm currently in the process of finishing my first book manuscript, which is titled Fired Up, Ready to Go, Pride, Shame, and Anger in African American Politics. I teach courses on American government, public opinion and political behavior, political psychology, race and ethnicity in American politics, and this semester I just started teaching research seminar. So I'll give you a little bit of background information on me so you can understand where I'm coming from and how I'm going to structure the rest of this conversation. So I grew up in Alpharetta, Georgia, just outside of Atlanta. I did my undergraduate research and work at Bethune-Cookman University. I attended the Ralph Bunche Summer Institute in 2007. I received my master's and PhD from Vanderbilt in 2013. And while I was at Vanderbilt, I was a National Science Foundation graduate research fellowship recipient. I actually finished my PhD in the spring of 2014, but I was done writing in 2013, right? And so right now, I currently serve on the graduate committee at Villanova. And so we review applications for our master's program. I've also served on several internal committees for our Presidential Scholars Program here at Villanova, Fulbright Scholar application committees, and the Truman Scholars Program. So I've had quite a bit of experience both reading and writing personal statements. And so for our topics today, I'm going to try to cover three main things. The first is to understand the purpose of a personal statement. Then second, we're going to navigate the structure of a personal statement. And I'll conclude by discussing some do's and don'ts that you should try to govern yourselves by when you're putting your personal statement together. So first, I think the most important thing that you want to realize about your personal statement is that it's not your resume, right? So most people try to use the personal statement to restate their resume in essay or paragraph form. Do not do this. The committee can read your resume, they can read your CV. They don't need you to rewrite what you've already included in your application materials. And so one of the things that I like to suggest to people is that you should view your personal statement as the narrative of your life. You want to use vivid language, you want to tell these stories, and you should consider a few questions. The first is, what makes you unique? The second is, what are your special abilities, your attributes, or your accomplishments? You should think about how have your life experiences thus far shaped your desire to pursue a PhD and even further your other career aspirations. And so your personal statement is your chance to stand out from all of the other applicants, right? There's something about your life and your life experiences to date that no one else has and no one else has done. And so what you want to do in the personal statement is tell us this story and why these things that have happened in your life have inspired you to pursue, especially a PhD. The faculty reviewing these applications want to see that you also have a personal commitment to this career in particular. So another part on this and making it the narrative of your life is that you want to make sure that you dig deep. Right. So the personal statement requires a great deal of introspection. And so why do you want to do this? Like, you're not just giving really the crap reason. This is what I have in my notes, the crap reason. The crap reason that you tell your family and friends why you're attending grad school. But really, you want to try and understand. Oh, is that my PowerPoint coming up? Oh, thanks. You really want to try and understand. Can I can't see anything else on my screen now. You really want to try and understand. How's that? Anywho, you want to try and understand why you decided to choose this career in the first place, and make sure that the people that are reading your letters are deeply aware of those things as well. So we're looking at Annalisa's screen right now, which is my PowerPoint. But I can't see my screen anymore where I had my notes pulled up. So is that going to be a problem, Annalisa? No. Let's see, options, original signs. All right, we're good. I'm good now. I exited the full screen. All right.
Great.
So on the next slide, if we can go there. I have the structure of your personal statements. So these are just some tips about what you should include and what you shouldn't. And I think Annalisa and Kim are going to post this PowerPoint so you all can read it later.
Yeah,
thank you. Thanks so much. I was like, wait, I can't see anything. All right, so the structured personal statements. The first part of your personal statement is the introduction, which is the most important part. So you want to begin your essay with some kind of hook. Maybe that's a quote, maybe that's a rhetorical question, perhaps it's an interesting statement about yourself. But what you want to remember is that graduate committees are swamped with applications. So you want to make the first line very attention grabbing, right? You want to make them want to read more. So saying I want to get a PhD because I enjoy writing and conducting research, that's not going to cut it, right? On some level, all applicants enjoy doing this. And you're also probably competing with people who are at the top of their respective classes, much like you are. So that's probably not going to be your selling point either. So at the very beginning, you want to get your readers' attention. You want them to read the introduction and immediately say to themselves that they want to read and learn more about you as an individual. So my personal statement in grad school, I started with a quote from Robert Frost, and it said, "Two roads diverge in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all of the difference." And so after that, or at least I perceived the culmination of my life experiences at that time to be about my life on this road less traveled by. And so the remainder of my essay was structured about my journey on the road less traveled. So we'll come back to that in a few minutes when we talk about the conclusion. But once you get to the body of your essay, you want to describe your life experiences that have prepared you not only for graduate school, but for whatever career you're going into. At this point in time, if you have Bunche experience or any other research or methodological skills, you'll also want to highlight this in your personal statement as well, perhaps courses that you've taken with certain individuals, working as a research assistant or a teaching assistant, anything that you think might help you stand out in the application process, you want to highlight it in the body of this paper, of this personal statement. And before you conclude, you also want to include one paragraph about why that particular institution is the best fit for you. One of the things people are going to be interested in understanding is who do you want to work with when you're coming here? You could decide to pursue a PhD really anywhere, but why is it this institution that you would like to come to? And it's not just about listing the professors that are there that you want to work with. You might want to dig a little deeper and go and read their CVs to understand what books they've actually put out, the articles they've published, and reference that in your letter because it shows that you've done, or in your personal statement, because it shows that you've done a significant amount of research. You also want to make sure that the schools that you're applying to, and I think this is for a later webinar, but they have multiple people that are interested in your topic of research. Just because faculty members, if there's only one, you never know if that person might be on the job market, they could be leaving soon. So you want to make sure that you have at least 2 to 3 people in each department that you could quite possibly see yourself working with. And in the conclusion, you definitely want to wrap it up, explain why graduate school and receiving a PhD is the best for you, and what you hope to contribute to the discipline or broader society. And also bring back the theme from the beginning, right? We don't want to just have a random theme or quote or rhetorical question at the beginning and we never see it again because that would be quite odd. So you want to make sure that that's a refuting theme throughout the body of your essay, and then as well as the conclusion. So I concluded my essay with something along the lines of getting into graduate school would allow me to continue my journey on the road less traveled, right, as an African-American female. So bring it back full force and try and restate it throughout. So a few do's for your personal statement. Follow instructions, don't go over the required page limit. Make sure you follow any margin and font specifications. Be positive, be honest and sincere. Get personal. Demonstrate your motivation and your capacity to succeed. You want to include any information related to research and or teaching experience. You want to make sure you proofread. And I have 3 points about proofreading because I think it's that important. You want to allow at least 3 people to read it and give you feedback. And you might also consider visiting your writing and or career center on campus for additional feedback. And here's another point that I have. It's not actually on the slide, but you need to work all of the contacts that you have. So if you went to the Ralph Bunche Summer Institute, or if you went to any other institute, or you've attended any college recruitment fairs for graduate school, you want to keep in touch with these people that you met initially, and you want to send them an email and let them know that you are applying to the program. Again, depending on where you're applying, these people are seeing hundreds, quite possibly thousands of applications. You want to do any and everything that you can possibly do to stick out, and having somebody on the inside never hurts. Send them an email and say, I'm submitting my application, remind them of where they met you, maybe a pleasant exchange that you had. We discussed blah, blah, blah. Just want to let you know I'm putting my application in, and I look forward to hearing from you all soon. Like, that's enough for an email, but you might want to do something just to get you on the radar screen. Some don'ts that I have for the personal statement. I said get personal in the do's, but here's the issue. Don't get too personal. And I could tell you a number of stories, but I'll just say this. I'll say keep it clean. If there are issues with your grades or your test scores and you want to explain those issues, that's great. But the review committee does not need to know every single detail, right? We don't need to know every detail of maybe perhaps some kind of breakdown that you might have had while in school. We don't need to know about your parents' divorce and your cheating father that was an alcoholic and getting walked through all of that trauma. And you might be laughing on the other end or like smirking, but you'd be shocked at the too much information kinds of things people include in their personal statements. So you want to make sure that you're personal, but you also want to draw the line somewhere and not get too personal. You don't ever want to send your first draft, right? The first draft that you write of your personal statement is never going to be the best draft. Again, get this in front of as many people as possible. Parents, family, friends, faculty in particular, faculty that might be in your department that don't study what you're interested in. So that's what the committee is going to look like as well. That's reviewing your application. The last don't that I have is underselling your accomplishments. So I pulled a few Ralph Bunche Summer Institute alums, and I asked them for a gem that I could share with you all for our discussion today. And they said, do not undersell your accomplishments. Women and racial and ethnic minorities in particular, when writing their personal statements, they tend to minimize their accomplishments, but these essays are your time to shine, right? So get your humble brag on. You are essentially selling yourself to the committee. Some people even suggest that students should view the personal statement as a sales pitch of themselves. What would you need to say to convince someone, right, that you're the car that they should buy? All of these cars on the lot, here's why I may or may not be the best. And you want to talk about why, of course, you may be the best. And so I looked at a number of websites in preparation for this talk, but I also just used some things that I've learned as I've been looking at applications. And that's pretty much it, right? You definitely want to dig deep. Get personal, not too personal. You also want to highlight all of those things that you've had, all of the experiences that you've had to date that have prepared you for graduate school or a career in academia or a career where you might utilize your doctorate. So I'm looking forward to any questions that you might have about the personal statement. And I'm just now seeing your private message, Annalisa, about the PowerPoint. That was 10 minutes ago, so I apologize. But any questions that you might have about writing the personal statement, I'm more than happy to answer anything. And as always, I can tell them to send you my email. If you want me to even proofread your personal statements, I'm more than happy to do that for you as well. All right.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, Dr. Burge. I'm going to go ahead and unmute our participants here so we can have some time for questions.
Yeah.
So does anyone have any questions for Dr. Burge about your own personal statement?
I have a question kind of in general. So I've heard a bunch of different things about how it should be structured. And from some people, I've heard that you should get your research interests out in the open in the first paragraph as soon as possible after the hook. What are your thoughts on taking that approach?
I mean, I think especially if you can relate the hook to quite possibly your research interest, because some people have more developed interest than others. And if you're one of those people because you have had a number of these experiences, then highlight that, right? But there are also some people that might be coming straight from undergrad that haven't had the same experiences, or coming from the workforce that haven't had those experiences either. But if you've had it, put it in there, right? They want to see it. anything that demonstrates that you've had any kind of training in graduate school looks fantastic, or that you've conducted any kind of independent research, that you've thought about your own research question, you've put together a literature review, you've analyzed some data, right? That looks phenomenal. So after the hook, if you want to plug that right in there in the body, put it in there, put it up front. You want to present your best self to these institutions. And however that package might look, it might look more research oriented for someone maybe like you, but it might look maybe more leadership oriented or other quality oriented for someone else, right? But if it's experience that you have, absolutely put that up front, and don't be afraid to highlight all of that experience. 100% agree. Themes and projects that you find interesting, and the more people that you'd be interested in working with, the better, because you also don't know how your interests are going to change once you get to school. I applied to grad school and I thought that I was going to study Congress and representation in Congress, especially of racial and ethnic minorities. And that's what my FIT paragraph was about. And I got to grad school and I was like, actually, I'm less interested in the institutional side and more so on the public opinion, political psychology side. So your interest will probably change as well once you get there and you start taking more courses and you start figuring out, what really makes you excited about the discipline. So don't be afraid of that. You want to use all of your experiences that you've had to date to demonstrate that you're qualified, that you can handle grad school, that you can think independently, that you can work and execute research projects, and that you've looked through the faculty and you have people that you're interested in. But also, just in the meantime, just something to hold in your pocket, don't feel like because you wrote your personal statement about a certain amount of things or topics that you're beholden to those things, right? Because it's natural for people's research interests to especially change once they get into graduate school. Right? So maybe not subfield, but maybe interest in different aspects of the subfield. So I knew American politics going in, but I was on the institutional side in my applications, and then I come out being on the side of the people by the time I finish, right? So roundabout way of, in a long way, of answering your question.
Thank you.
No problem.
I have a question, Dr. Burge. Just in terms of time management,
Sure.
How much time would you recommend that students give themselves to work on an application and to work on the personal statement? And then how much time should you give typically to those that you're asking to read or to review that personal statement, so that you're mindful of their time, but you have enough time to incorporate any minor edits or changes before you send it off?
Great. Wonderful question. I think a mistake that a lot of people make is they want to type their personal statement the night before their application is due. And you can tell the students that have typed a rushed personal statement versus the ones that have really done the work in terms of digging deep and thinking about the narrative and the story of their life and how this next step fits into everything that they've done prior to. And so I would say, in terms of the personal statement, you want to start thinking about that as soon as possible and getting your thoughts and your outline together. And I think the personal statement is something that you work on throughout the application process. Like, I don't know that I would say, work on it for a week and you're done. I think it's something that as you're applying it to different places and you're thinking about what you want to do, and you're giving yourself a little more space outside of the classroom, that it's something you want to keep returning to and thinking about. And so I think it's more of a cumulative process for the personal statement. And I would probably say, like, as long as possible. In terms of how much time do you want to give faculty members? Faculty members are very busy. And so, again, being on the other side of things, like, this is due in 2 days. Can't you read it and give me feedback? No, I can't, because I have meetings all day on this day. I have deadlines. I have all of these other things. So I think you definitely want to give your faculty members at least 2 weeks to look at any personal statements or application materials. So I feel like really the entire fall semester, right, a few months is what you probably end up spending your time on in terms of your application. There are a lot of people that struggle with grad applications because they don't have a great writing sample. And the good thing about Bunche and other summer programs, or even papers where you've actually completed some kind of research or some kind of empirical analysis, is that you'll probably spend a significant amount of time editing that writing sample as well. So if I had to give it a timeline, I would say I would feel comfortable spending like at least 2 months working on grad school applications. And if you're sending anything for people to review, you want to give them at least 2 weeks to review it and give yourself, at least a week to think about what they've said in terms of making revisions to various things. Yeah, so I'd say about 2 months, but I wouldn't, like the last minute applications, you can just tell every single time, the quality is just very poor. And it's like, oh yeah. And then you can see, on the other side of things, you can see when they even submitted the application, right? So it's like 11:57 just before, the deadline. And so not everyone is looking at those things, but especially when you notice that, an application might not be up to par, you might scroll through and look at some additional things. Well, like, yeah, they waited till the last minute as well. So you just want to be as prepared as possible. You want to do as much as you can on the front end. The personal statement, though, is really big, right? We can read your resume. Most people that are applying, not most, pretty much everyone that's applying to a grad program is probably going to be able to write well. These are the high achievers. So your writing sample is important as well. But the personal statement is where we really get to know you as a person, right? Know what you're about, where you're coming from, why you're planning on spending the next 5 to 8, maybe to 9 years getting a couple of degrees, and what you hope to do with those things, right? To make meaningful changes, in the discipline or in the world. So I think the personal statement is probably one of the more important aspects of the application. That's the part that I look forward to reading to the most whenever I'm reviewing applications, just in terms of getting to know people, because it says so much more than your transcript and your writing sample and your CV. It lets me get to know you as a person. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
No problem.
Other questions from our students?
I have heard also that if you've been in contact with a professor at an institution, you should ask them if you can mention them in your personal statement and say something to the effect of, I was in discussion with X professor and blah, blah, blah. But in light of what you said about the inside politics of it all, would that be a bad move?
Listen, that's why I was debating whether or not to drop the inside politics bomb on this webinar, because I feel like it's a good thing to know, but I don't want it to serve as a deterrent in terms of maybe you thinking about who you should and shouldn't list, right? So I can see both sides of this. Feel free, by all means, to email the professor that you've been involved with and say, is it okay for me to mention you in my personal statement? And I think they'd be fine with it. If they're at a recruitment fair and they remember you, maybe you stood out, sure, ask them. I don't recall that I actually listed people in my personal statement. I know that in our grad applications here, there are a number of students that actually contact our grad director to ask questions about the program. And so they'll mention that in their personal statement. Like after speaking to Professor Kreutzer on the phone, who's our grad director, I really got an understanding of the program, and that even emboldened me further to pursue this line. Some people do include things like that. So you can. Again, I probably shouldn't have dropped the inside politics bomb, but I feel like some people need to know because it's real. So just approach that portion of your essay with a bit of caution, right? You want to talk about the goodness of fit for the program writ large. Maybe they have a few different centers that you're interested in working in. So Vanderbilt has the Center for the Study of Democratic Institutions, or the RIPS Lab, which is research on individuals, politics, and society. And so maybe you say, I also see myself plugging into, these different labs and centers that your department has. And there are a number of faculty there that seem to be interested in institutions or public opinion that I could see myself working with. Some of the projects that I think are particularly fascinating that align with my interests are blah, 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 right? So it demonstrates that you've thought through these things and why they're interesting, right? So I'll just say that.
Yeah, and I'll just follow up on that. I think Dr. Burge's discussion of being mindful of that is very important, and it's true in the few departments that I've had the opportunity to teach in or work in. It's just like any other microcosm of society. There are folks that get along with other folks and folks that don't, or there are camps. Sometimes those camps are split in terms of the subfields or and it's interesting because, as you know, political scientists and scholars can be very passionate about the work that they do, and that sometimes flows into the way that they interact with each other in a department. So I think it's smart to, if you have taken the initiative to reach out to professors or the grad director, you should mention that, but be careful about crossing that line to say, towards the point where you might say something like, oh, the only person I would ever think of working with is Professor X. Don't do that, because that professor may not be available, or that professor may not be on the committee that's reviewing the application. So you want to make sure not to exclude yourself from opportunities that are available widely throughout the department. So that's how I would say it. I do have one additional question. So given that we're kind of in a political campaigning season, a number of students that I've come in contact with have expressed interest and have shared their experience with regards to being politically active or participating in civic engagement on various levels and across the spectrum. So I'm wondering if at any time it would be appropriate to mention that in a personal statement, and if so, how do you do it in order to kind of boost or supplement your statement, but not take away from it and lead to a distraction where a reader might say, oh, that's weird that she's mentioning that, or something. Is there a way to do that, or would you recommend kind of leaving that out of a statement?
I mean, I could see someone including it in the statement to the extent that maybe it motivates some of the questions they're interested in exploring as a graduate student. So it was when I was working for this campaign that I realized that, I maybe want to learn more about like campaign finance reform or whatever, or like how we might go about effectively mobilizing voters, because I went and I knocked on doors and I also did phone calls, but I'm not sure which one of these processes are more effective in terms of actually getting people to turn out. And it just so happens that there's some political science research that's about this that I don't know that answers this question effectively. And so in that way, or maybe by virtue of participating in a political campaign, you realize that you weren't just interested in the mechanics of like politics or campaigning writ large, that you had more questions and you needed a deeper understanding of things, which is why you decided to pursue a PhD. So I think there are ways that you can work it in there and make it effective for the personal statement. But if it's not part of that narrative, right, I wouldn't just like, oh, and by the way, I worked for the campaign, because you're probably going to list it on your resume or your CV that you worked there, so they can see that. But I think it's especially useful when people work it in some way that motivated their interest. So for example, we have a student in our master's program now, and he actually works for one of the congressmen in Pennsylvania. And in his personal statement, and I remember his personal statement, and he's in our program now, and this personal statement was last spring. And just to note, like, these are the kinds of effects that personal statements can have. He talked about how he's a disabled veteran, and how he ended up working for this congressman in the Wounded Warriors Project. Like, he's the person that represents the congressman for Wounded Warriors and does work with veterans in the area. And he realized, as a result of working with the congressman, that he's more interested in these research questions, right, that he doesn't necessarily have the answer to while doing the day-to-day operations. And so he goes on to list some of these things that he's interested in, that he's observed And he's looked through some literature and recognizes that there's actually people out here conducting work on this that he's also interested in contributing to, right? And so that's an example where he was able to use, his work experience in a congressional office to motivate why he wanted to pursue a master's degree, right? And just bringing that in together. And we've had other students in the past, applications that I've reviewed in particular, where they have talked about working on campaigns, but it's not just like, I worked on a campaign as well, that's why you should accept me into your political science program, right? It's something deeper than just working on the campaign that inspired me to pursue this path for my life, right? So I think there's an effective way to work it in, but it can't just be like an afterthought or a mention. It has to be like some part of this narrative that you've put together for your life.
Great, thank you.
No problem. Got a little snafu with the PowerPoint earlier, but now I'm feeling good, so.
Good.
We're good.
Any other questions? If there are no other questions, I'd like to maybe put our two students on the spot here, since Dr. Burge has been doing all the talking. And if each of you could just briefly introduce yourself, tell us what you're interested in, and if you participated in the RBSI program, what was your paper topic? That would be great. Priscilla?
So hi, Dr. Burge. My name is Priscilla Suarez. I'm a senior political science major at Loyola Marymount University. I participated in RBSI over the summer, and my research topic is an international relations topic. It was assessing the UN Security Council resolution on women, peace, and security for one of its 4 pillars to see if it's been effective or not. And my interests lie exactly in that, topics related to women, peace, security, intergovernmental organizations, and how they influence or don't influence human rights practices and people more broadly, and I'll be applying to graduate school this coming fall.
That's awesome.
Thank you.
Great,
Thank
thank
you. At APSO?
Yes, I was.
Okay.
Yeah.
You look familiar.
Yeah.
And Niketis?
Hi. Sorry, my name is kind of weird. Well, my name is Nico DS. I'm a political science major. I also participated in the Bunche program over the summer. My interests are in the construction of race in Latin America. And my topic was about, I particularly pay attention to the Dominican Republic and Haiti and the struggle that they have been in those nations throughout the years, especially the court ruling of 2013 that basically took away citizenship from Dominicans of Haitian descent. And I'm interested in the construction of race in Latin America, but I'm also interested in how Latinos who migrate to the U.S. see the racial order once they come here.
Right. Awesome. Both awesome projects. I mean, and because you have the Ralph Bunche Summer Institute, I mean, I'm not sure if this is going to be posted online, but if it is, RBSI, I mean, if you participated in that program, it says a lot, right? Because there are a number of applicants that Kim can probably speak more about, but it's a very competitive program to get into. And the simple fact that you got in and you were able to execute a research project and even take a few courses, that says a lot about what you can already do before you get to grad school. I think I even included my Duke transcripts in my grad applications from Bunche, from my courses, just to show and over the summer I took a few grad classes. So I think I might be ready for this. But the Bunche program is such awesome preparation for graduate school. I remember the first day of the Bunche program, people got into their rooms, and my friend Nyron, who's a professor at Temple, he went into his room and he laughed because he thought that his roommate had brought a ton of books for the summer. So he was like, who is this loser person in my room that brought all these books for the summer? And his roommate was like, no, dude, these are our books. Like, yours are right there. And so then later that night when we go to the first dinner, Dr. McLean says, if you came here for fun, you're in the wrong place. This is political science boot camp. And then everyone's attitude was like, what's that? But she's right, you know, with the amount of reading that you have to do while you're at Bunche, it is a very real and raw look at what graduate school is like, especially maybe in your first semester. So you already have that under your belt and going for you, and you already have the paper that you've completed for Bunche that you might be able to use and clean up a little bit for your writing sample. But you know, talk about all of those things, especially the Ralph Bunche Summer Institute. Why'd you even decide to apply to that, right? And why do you think that this is, you know, your future life? How could you see yourself fitting in as an academic? Just go with it. The Ralph Bunche Summer Institute has a great deal of respect and PhD programs. And so if you have that on your resume, you look great already, right? So work that.
Wonderful. Thank you. Well, we can mute that one mic. Okay, thank you. Well, I just want to thank everyone for participating, especially Dr. Burge, for sharing such a wonderful, informative presentation. We know that you speak from experience, and we value the time because I'm sure you have classes and students that are kind of beating down your door to ask you more questions about this semester's work. So we will be able to make available the presentation to the students that participated. And also, as you heard earlier at the very beginning of the conference call, Dr. Burge has graciously offered to share her contact information with you. And I think she may have even have offered to review a personal statement if those were interested, and you should be very mindful of her time and find out when you need to get that information to her. Also, I'd like to make a plug for the APSA Minority Fellowship Program. The application is due on November 1st, which is this coming Tuesday. If you have not yet applied and you're interested, please do so. And also, I want to thank Annalisa Diaz-Mendoli for organizing such a great webinar and conference call. And thank you again for your time. So I think we are done here, but it was great seeing everyone. And we will send a follow-up email to the participants as well, so that just to kind of recap on a few things and put you in touch with Dr. Burge.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Meow.
Huh?
Bye.
See ya.